Great. Welcome, everybody. Morning, evening, afternoon, depending on what part of the world that you're in. My name is Seema Patel. I'm a senior advisor at Collective Mind. So welcome to the community conversation. That's where you're supposed to be. So if that's what you're looking for, you're in the right spot. So welcome. I'm just going to give a very, very brief introduction because we really want to get sort of to the substance of today's conversation because it's going to be a very, very interesting one. So for those who are new to our Collective Mind events, just a little bit about who we are and what we do. We are all about networks. Maybe that was already apparent, but just to reiterate and reinforce that we are all about networks. It's what we're all about, where our goal is really to help networks be more effective and impactful. And we do that in a few different ways. The two main ways are by supporting networks directly through consulting, advisory support, capacity building, and activities such as that. The other way that we do it is by providing learning and professional development opportunities for network practitioners that want to improve their skills, their knowledge, and approaches to network management. And we basically are trying to help you do what you do better with more tools, with more knowledge, and with more practical tips and experiences. And these community conversations are one of many examples of how we do that. That may actually be the shortest intro I've ever given. We're going to kick right off into the format for today. We're doing things a little bit differently than we do in our normal community conversations, and it's really with the idea of having you walk away with some very practical tips and experiences and some very immediate practices that you can take away with you to your own networks. So I'm going to let our host for today sort of tell you more about this as he goes on. But this is basically what we're going to do. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to our host to talk about peer learning and networks. So welcome, Zarko Palankov. He is the founder of LeadIN and a senior organizational development consultant. So Zarko, over to you.
Great, thank you, Seema. And you can stop the screen sharing. We can see each other. First invite, or well, first note is yes, you'll hear my cat in the background sometimes. The first invitation is, if you can, turn on your video. So this would be, I'd love to see everybody if you can. No, that's okay. The very first thing we're going to do is check in. This is a common practice I use in every meeting, every workshop, everything that I do. And what is a check-in? A check-in is just a way to connect to the space and connect to one another and bring all voices to the room. Since we're a relatively small group so far, although people will be coming in, my invitation actually is to check in via audio. So the prompt is, and you can see it at the on page 2 of the Google Doc. You can think of the Google Doc in several ways. One is it's a place where we can all collectively take notes. It also serves, instead of a PowerPoint, you can kind of follow along, there as well, and you can see all the various prompts. So the invitation for the check-in is, just in a sentence, your name, and then what you understand by peer learning, and why is peer learning important to you, and your network. So that's the quick invitation. I'll kind of call on people, and then you can check in right then and there. You can pass if you need to. You don't have to go right away. So the way I have you on my screen, maybe Faye and then Saura.
So we should just unmute ourselves and say.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Just unmute and just say in a sentence or two your name, and just in a sentence a response to that prompt that I shared, and I'll repeat it. What do you understand by peer learning? Why is peer learning important to you?
So my name is Faye Longo. My preferred pronouns are she, her, or they, them. And I understand peer learning as learning from your peers. So like learning from other folks that maybe have like lived expertise or are in a similar role to you or doing similar work. And it's important to me and my network because it's a central part of the current position that I hold at Vermont Food Bank. Sorry, there's construction happening. I don't know if you all can hear that. And it's important to me personally because as a person with lived expertise of poverty and hunger, which directly relates to the work I'm doing professionally right now, I think it's important to value that kind of unique learning that comes from having lived experience. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Faye. All right, Saurav and then Francesca.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks for this call. My name is Saurav, and I am a research manager at the Alliance for Peace Building. And what do I understand by peer learning? So I guess similar to what Faye said, learning from peers, but also like with peers, I think. So for me, peer learning is learning with peers. Why is it important to me? So essentially, I work in a field that where we're trying, well, at least my part, I work with a lot of organizations that do interfaith engagement, interfaith action, interfaith dialogue, and our field lacks sort of evidence to support the impact. So as a sort of peer community, we can work together to sort of make the case for interreligious, interfaith engagement. So I think doing that as a community, as a network is important because we can leverage sort of collective power to say, hey, the work that we are all doing is impactful. So yeah, that's why it's important to me. Sorry. And thanks for this call. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. So Francesca and then Dulce.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Francesca. I'm calling from Glasgow. I work for a charity called the Alliance. It's the Health and Social Care Alliance Scotland. Peer learning to me is very much kind of what Faye and Saurav have already expressed, just kind of learning from people that do similar things to us. And I think it's important, at least in the sector I work in, because we're very, we have low resources, and sometimes it's nice if you don't duplicate work that's already being done, but also just learning from things that you might be working on as well, just to kind of foster that sense of collaboration rather than competition. I think it's really important, and just to have support as well as learning.
Great, thank you, Francesca. So Dulce and then Susie.
Thank you, Zarko. So I work in the Open Learning Campus at the World Bank. And for me, peer learning is, as you all said already, learning from each other. And what I like the most about peer learning, or why I'm attracted to it, is because it happens all the time. Inside that training or outside the classroom or outside the room, in the hall, wherever you are. And it's more for me an attitude of learning from the others and breaking silos. And for me, it's a tool to innovate together, not only learning from the others, but kind of, I think for me, the important part is when you begin learning together and creating new ideas.
Great, thank you, Dulce. Susie and then Clemens.
Thanks. Suji, she, her. I'm on Vancouver Island in Canada, and I work right now with 2 communities of practice that work in food justice, food security, food access, poverty reduction. Yeah, I see you say. And layering in on top of what other folks have said, peer learning is, those groups are coming together for peer learning and to build a shared practice, which also connects to movement building and building up shared analyses and solidarity as kind of a slower burn process. I see that as one of the possibilities around peer learning is actually having conversations that build solidarity and build a movement.
Great, thank you, Julie. Clemens, if this is how you said, and then I'll invite.
Yeah,
Sima
perfect. Thanks, Zarko. And hi, everyone. Sorry for being a bit late. I'm Clemens. I'm based in Germany, in Bonn, part of a social enterprise called Unity Effect, and we help organizations to scale their impact. So for me, peer learning also has a part of creating shared realities. There's a lot of perspectives out there, how you can understand or make sense of the world. And by learning together, we also create part of that reality that we can then understand.
Great, Sima. How about you check in, and then I'll go.
A little bit distracted taking some notes. Yeah, I think for me, peer learning is very much about welcoming people in to be able to express their views and share their experiences, while also being able to feel like it's a safe space to say, I don't know. I think that's a very important part of learning in any scenario, in any situation. So creating that safe space, getting different experiences, but also being able to feel vulnerable during a learning process, which is always quite complex.
Wonderful, thank you. I know we have a few more people and you're on video, so I'm just going to assume that you may not be able, if you can turn your video on and would like to say a word, please do. If not, you can also check in the Google Doc. Okay, Cindy, and then I'll go.
It's bright and early, dark and early here in Alaska. So I'm a little late, sorry. Yeah, I am a teacher. I understand peer learning really well. I'm retired. I'm trying to get adults to do peer learning, and that's why I'm here. It's really too hard. So I'm hoping you guys tell me all about it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cindy. I don't know about all, but we'll tell you some about it, I guess. Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is Zarko. I work in different places, but suffice it to say here in DC, well, in Washington DC, not here, because you're not here, or most of you are not here. For me, why is peer learning important? Because I believe in tapping into the collective wisdom. And by wisdom, I mean mind, body, heart, spirit, not just mind, of a group of people. And that, learning together creates a whole different dimension than learning alone, or learning passively, or learning from experts, or from some other means. To kind of give you a quick overview of what we're going to do, I'm jumping into the agenda, as Sima said. Going to set some context. I'm kind of going to give you some pointers, some notes, by my perspectives here, and then we're going to do a peer learning activity, because if we're going to talk about peer learning, we might as well actually do some peer learning, and then we'll see where we're at, and we'll kind of debrief collectively, and we'll do some collective sense making. So that's the basic plan, and close off with some resources. So with that. What is peer learning? I think you all defined it. Just real brief. Like from my perspective, is people learning from peers with and together with and from one another. I think one qualifier I would add is in an equitable and egalitarian way, right? Because in a way that there's no hierarchy, there's no boss who tells you, oh, you go learn from this person or whatever. It's something that we do because we want to. And it's something that happens, because we believe that we have something to offer and contribute, and we believe that we have something to learn and gain from others. So that's my basic definition in a nutshell. I'll kind of share some categories. And by the way, if you under setting the context, you'll see again, like think of it like slides. So you can actually kind of see the flow or like the main points that I'm covering. If you want to, if it's easier for you to follow this way. So in basic categories, because learning with and from others is could be a little vague. I can name, and there are definitely more, 3 categories. One, knowledge exchange, like literally I say, oh, check out this book or go to this event or, here's something I learned from X. It's just knowledge exchange, resource exchange at the very, very basic level, right? That can happen in an email, it can happen in an online platform, it can happen in an event like this. Another category, it's more around mutual aid and peer support. So peer support would be, I come in with a challenge of some sort and I need help. And others kind of provide advice, provide guidance, provide resources, or just even brainstorm with me, together to help with my challenge or whatever it is that I need. Mutual aid, like in this case, mutual aid, it could even be beyond a challenge. It could be like, actually, I need money. I need help paying for something. I need somebody to do X, Y, Z, for these. In some cases, mutual aid also comes into place. And it's beautiful when it does, because it shows like the real spirit of a community. You can think of a neighborhood where a neighbor's like, hey, I need something from my next door neighbor, maybe pick up groceries for me. Like that's mutual aid, like sick or somehow unable to do it myself. A third category is then the learning together, where I want to focus specifically on skills or new practices, where we're literally like in a group of people and we are building a practice together, we're building a skill together. Doesn't have to be necessarily a curriculum, but there is some content and some topic and some domain. So instead of, for example, like instead of going to an official class, to a formal class for, I don't know, network building, right? You basically get a group of people, it's like 6-8 people, like, okay, let's learn about network building together with it from one another, kind of come up with something. So these are some of the basic categories from my perspective. Some types, how to set it up, just simple, straightforward, right? You can have structured, unstructured, like what I described, like, hey, it's a group of people 6 weeks, once a week, or whatever, that's more structured. Unstructured would be online platform. Anybody can post anything, like think like LinkedIn, you post something, people respond, right? It's unstructured. Formal, informal, right? Like formal, it can require registration form, it can require a bunch of things, you can have a bunch of resources, you can have a learning platform. Informal, maybe just, hey, we're getting together for an hour to discuss some challenges. The third basic type, dyads, which is groups of 2, or pods, like small groups. So think of it as groups of 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 people versus like a full community, something like 20, 40, 100 people. So that can happen in different ways. Like obviously with 100 people, we're probably talking more about like an online platform. Although it could be an event like this, where 100 people are broken into groups and like learning together. But there's a big difference between a small group and then kind of a big group. Then you have one-off and recurrent, right? Same example. One-off would be somebody once offers a challenge and people provide support, or it could be recurrent, where every month people meet up and then maybe they rotate. And or if they're learning something together, they meet every week, and each week there's a different topic and a different skill to build or practice. And then of course there's synchronous and asynchronous. So basically synchronous, what we're doing right now is synchronous, where it's happening at the same time. Asynchronous would be basically a platform where I post something today, somebody responds, tomorrow. So these are some types, and really here I'm mostly focused on like the synchronous, the in-person / virtual, where people are together, not on online platforms, because that's a little different, and it would be too much to try to cover both, but I wanted to name it. Now, in terms of my background and how I come to this, I'll offer a few points. So my very first I started off in 2008 after grad school, smack in the middle of the financial crisis, co-founding a nonprofit in language education. And in that space, our teachers were all volunteers, native speakers of 60 plus different languages. And what was beautiful, one of the many things that was really beautiful is that because they were all volunteers, and they're all basically 99% had never taught before, they were new to it, there were ample opportunities for peer learning and ample opportunities for how do you get teachers of the same language, teachers in the same language group, or teachers completely different languages to kind of share their craft with each other and like learn together how to actually become better teachers. So exposing that environment, I saw very early on how powerful this could be. After that, a few years later, I started what started as an informal community and became a social enterprise called LeadIN. And the sole purpose for LeadIN was to, on the one hand, democratize leadership development and basically make it accessible to more people anywhere. And on the other hand, break away from that traditional paradigm that, you have an expert leader, you have a leadership coach or whatever who's going to teach you about leadership because they know, and then you just kind of listen and learn. I turned it around, with the intention of basically setting it as like, no, everybody is a leader. Everybody already has plenty of skills and abilities and potential and contributions. Instead of waiting for a quote unquote expert to teach you this, how about we learn with and from one another? So the whole premise behind LeadIN was that it is peer learning. Like the whole thing is peer learning. And then what I've also done is within the World Bank, where I spent a few years as a consultant. I've built like learning communities where I've used like essentially like a learning circles or a format where, again, a bunch of people, small group of people together, like literally sit in a circle and share learning and knowledge with one another. And I've also kind of helped coach and build capacity for people to create communities of practice in very diverse, very different ways. And in some of those communities of practice, or most of them, have a strong learning component. So there's peer learning happening within a larger community. And finally, some of my more recent experiences actually as a participant, because I'll give you examples. So I'm part of a peer coaching circle. We meet monthly. We use a case clinic, which is a Presencing Institute kind of format. It's in the resources. Actually, Dulce is a member of that coaching circle here with us. And we meet monthly and we rotate. We each have a case, rotate cases, and we provide support to each other in a very generative way. I was recently part of another learning circle called Reimagine Livelihood, which is really exploring relationships to money. And there's just so much there. It's incredible. So a good friend of mine, Carol, kind of set it up and was the facilitator. It was maybe 8 of us who did this. We met 6 times for an hour and a half every 2 weeks. And then after that, we officially closed and then are now meeting once a month to kind of catch up. And so during those, essentially 3 months, we spent a lot of time kind of sharing and learning from each other and sharing and like reading different articles and videos and really trying to unpack our relationship to money and how to cultivate a healthier relationship. And this is entirely decentralized, like just a bunch of friends kind of doing it together, right? Informal. I'm also part of what's called the communications doctrine. It's a community of practice, and we're practicing 2 different methods of communication, if you will. One is a bomb dialogue, the other one is a T group. These may be unfamiliar to you, and that's fine. Don't need to get into that. Suffice it to say that we meet, depending on what you want to practice. There are bi-weekly meetings for 2 hours where we literally just sit together. Typically, about 10-ish people show up, and it's different people every time. So it's not bound to the exact same group. And we practice this. And I can say with Bomb Dialogue, we started in January. Now it's November, so it's basically been 11 months me doing this every other Friday with a little bit of a break in the summer, and it works wonderfully. And again, it requires a little bit of setting up, but it just basically people who are interested show up, and we learn from one another. And then the final thing I'm going to say before we actually do a little bit of peer learning is to, now that I provide examples, is to just share some basic principles that I at least personally follow when I'm in the space of designing, wanting to design like some sort of a peer learning environment. The very first one, shifting your mindset. I think a lot of people have this definition, oh, you're young, you're junior, you don't know, you're expert, you're older, you're more, whatever. Thus, we want to hear from you, not from you. So shifting the mindset that everybody can contribute, everybody has something to say, right? When you shift that mindset and create space like this, you can really tap into the collective wisdom of the group. The second, creating the container or the space with a lot of care and attention. So you want to be intentional, you want to create space for or open space for co-creation. You're likely going to iterate and change things as you go along. You want to be clear about how you set up the expectations that you set. Container is very important, to be thoughtful. Another one would be how you host, how you show up as the host, matters a lot. The energy that you bring into the space and how you show up and what you say and what you don't say really makes a difference. So you have to set your own intention and kind of ground yourself when you if you find yourself in hosting or facilitating or somehow organizing some sort of peer learning. Identifying shared goals and interests, that seems very common, but a lot of people kind of miss it. Meaning, if you want to create peer learning, then you better make sure that the people who are part of that peer learning, have shared goals and interests. Otherwise, you will feel disconnected. And then finally, basic structure. Setting up a basic structure, very important, but then keeping it fluid, experimenting, reflecting on what works and what doesn't, and iterating. I think you all have, from experience, know that if you sign up for something that's like 2 months, 1 month, 3 months, every week or whatever, it's easy to commit. Once you lose the structure, one is like, oh, the thing is done. Shall we continue meeting? People are like, no, stuff comes up, calendar fills up with other things. So setting the container and setting a beginning and an end is very important. Some basic tips on my end that I've learned over the years. Size, 4 to 6 people is a great group. 10 to 12 is also another kind of great number. I mean, in between works too, but like somehow like these two are, to me, a little better. Frequency, you want to do once a week if you want it to be a little bit more robust, or once a month if you want to provide more space. Like the in between, to me, it doesn't work as well. Duration per session, especially in a virtual space, like I wouldn't go more than an hour and a half. Like an hour is maybe a little not enough, but like an hour and a half seems to be a good. And then the length, doing something for less than 4 weeks would basically not be enough. Doing something for more than 8 would probably stretch it too long, and you lose people, and it just be hard to maintain. So something to keep in mind. Facilitation, I've used all sorts of different models. I like co-facilitation where you have 2 hosts basically kind of holding space. Or I also really like, shared or rotated facilitation where every week is somebody else or a different pair of people. I've even experimented with like a facilitation less, like literally we show up and everybody holds the space together. That tends to be a little bit more advanced. People need to be able to stay with like the uncertainty of like what that's going to look like. And then content, you can be predetermined, you can really have a syllabus, a curriculum, like readings and videos and whatever, or it could be emergent. It could be, we just bring in whatever's relevant on that day or somewhere in between. So with that said, I'm going to pause here, and there'll be time for questions and other notes, but I think it's more important that you have a chance to process by yourselves and in a small group first. So what we're going to do is a little bit of journaling. So I invite you to just for a minute, if you have a pen, piece of paper, and/or if you want to do it on your computer, that's fine. We have the 3 questions under peer learning activity. Just don't write anything there just yet. But think about the 3 questions and journal a little bit on your own. I'll give you a minute before we break into groups. I'll read them out loud in case you're unable to follow. So the first one is, what is one insight, learning, discovery that might already be useful to your context and network? Like, what's one curiosity you hold? The second one is, what's one challenge related to peer learning that you're bringing with you? And the third is one example or lesson from your experience that could be useful to others. So this, can also put in the chat actually to make it easier. Although I see, okay, yeah, I'll put it in the chat as well. And so I invite you to take a minute and just jot down some notes. And then I'll explain what happens next shortly.
Sorry, I was just wondering, what's the difference between the first and the last question? So is the first one just around things that we want to learn about, and the last one is things we already know?
Oh, sure, that's a great question, Francesca. The first one was basically, at least it was intended as something from what you heard me say. Like if you kind of got something from what you heard me, it's like, oh, this is useful. And then the last one is, like you said, it's something you already know. Yeah. You can keep thinking and writing. Meanwhile, I'll explain the activity. So I'm doing kind of a modified 1 to 4-0, which some of you may be familiar because it's a liberating structure. We just did the 1, which is the individual reflection. So now instead of 2, we're going to skip the 4, but instead of the 2 and 4, we're just going to do groups of 3. We may have one group of 4. And the invitation is those same prompts that you were just reflecting on your own. Just discuss for 10 minutes in your small group, and then we'll come back. When you discuss, my one request is, you don't need to have a dedicated note taker per se, but do take notes in the spaces underneath. And I see you're already doing that. Just capture whatever kind of comes up and feels important. Just capture it under the respective heading. You don't have to attribute it. Doesn't matter how that gets captured. So just capture it. And then when you do that, I'll also mention that at the in the next section, we'll have questions. So if questions are arising specifically for me or even just in general that you're holding, feel free to write them down under the questions heading on page 4, because that when we come back, I can address some of those. So So it's a good way for us to surface them now. And so with that, Seema, please open the rooms.
We'll see everybody back in the main room soon.
We were done quite quickly, so we came back.
Welcome back. Well, you can use that opportunity. Okay, everybody's back now.
Welcome back,
Yeah,
everybody. Yeah.
Let me guess, there wasn't enough time, right? Well, now's also a good opportunity to exchange. If you want to exchange contact info and send emails or whatever to each other, like, that's a good time to do it. Also a good time to, if you want to write a question on page 4, like right below where you were just typing. Now's a good time to do that. And these questions, by the way, don't feel like you need to do your questions now. What I'm going to offer is, whatever questions show up there in the next, day or so, I'll take some time after the session to actually write down, brief, brief responses. So feel free to, type questions there. So now we have about 5 or 6 minutes before closing out, and I looked at the Google Doc, and I'm kind of curious. There seem to be a couple of things show that they seem to be on the topic of how do we share out, like, with the wider field. How do we capture what's happening and share with the larger group? So I wonder if one or however many of you talked about this, if you can maybe share a little bit about that challenge, like what you mean, and maybe we can chat about this real quick.
Zarko, I was typing away and didn't hear what you said. Could you please repeat it? I'm so sorry.
No worries. I was inviting those of you, or one of you who wrote the first couple of comments under the challenge, which seemed to be about how peer learning community connects with the wider field and how do we share learning in a larger group. So I was asking those who wrote that maybe to share a little bit more context about that challenge.
So I wrote the first part, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but sorry, the thing that I wrote is I would love to learn more about, like, how the community connects with the wider field and how do you do a good job about sharing what you've learned with the wider field. The context for that is basically, so at least in the field within which I'm facilitating this learning community, there isn't a whole lot of sort of data evaluation tools, knowledge about the practice. And I think the whole point of doing this is so that we learn together, so that people in the field benefit from what we've learned and don't make the same mistakes as we've been making, and don't go through the same challenges, or are able to sort of respond to the challenges because we've experienced them, right? So I was wondering, what are some of the ways we can do that?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I feel like, I can respond to a lot of these, but like obviously we don't have a ton of time. Let me just touch on 2 points, because my goal was to kind of read through the Google Doc and see what I can immediately respond to. So to this point, like number one, stay away from reports. Like reports that nobody reads. It's just kind of a given. So just think about other ways of sharing. And I didn't put it in the I don't think in the resources, but there's the, and I'll type it in the chat, the Art of Hosting and Harvesting Community, which is a global community of practice. I'm sure some of you are familiar with. They have a very strong practice of harvesting, which, for example, I'm not very good at. But harvesting is really just capturing meaning, making the intangible tangible, both for those who attended and those who didn't. Now the challenge there is that in our world, like it's basically, we do what we do not because it's best, but because those before us did it, right? So how do you break away from that cycle? Like we do reports because like that's what we know. Like the previous person did reports, the funder wants reports, like the client wants reports or says they want reports, even though they really don't read them. So how do you break away from from that? And I'll say at least check out the Art of Hosting and Harvesting for at least ideas on different ways of doing this. Another kind of related topic, look up the I'll put that in the chat too, Berkane Institute. It is very much about kind of local knowledge and local experience shared globally. And it's very much the concept of like not trying to replicate, not having the McDonald's model. Like we build a McDonald's in Venezuela this way, and then we build the same McDonald's in the same way in, like, I don't know, Cuba. Well, those are probably really bad examples of countries for McDonald's, but whatever. Versus the idea is that local community has an experience solving a challenge or addressing a challenge. And then they share the challenge and how they solved it, with the intention of not teaching another community how to do it, but just giving them an idea. And so the Berkane Institute has a bunch of these local, translocal kind of initiatives, and you can even look at like learning journeys and kind of site visits. And I think they even have videos and such of like that sort of learning. And I think the Walk Out, Walk On, a book by Meg Wheatley, who's a co-founder of the Berkane Institute. And I think that website has, because I may be confusing it, maybe the videos actually are there, but either way, between these two resources, you'll find some really cool ways of that sort of knowledge being captured and shared in a different space. All right, so I know we're close to time. So like I said, here's what I can, here's what I can offer. 1 hour is never going to be enough. If you put more questions in the Google Doc, I'll take time and respond, and just basically look at the Google Doc again in a day or two, and you'll see my responses. That's number one. Number two, you see my contact info, my email in the Google Doc as well. So just feel free to reach out for whatever reason, to do your own. Happy to do peer learning with anybody on this call. So that's number two. Number three, if we wanted to do like maybe a larger session or something like this, we can think about within Collective Mind whether there's appetite and whether we want to organize maybe like a longer workshop and we actually get more into the practices. And then number four, at the very bottom, right, like on page 6 in the appendix, has a bunch of resources. Actually, Art of Hosting and Harvesting now is at the bottom. Maybe Sina put it there just now, but check those out. Like those are some spaces, including some of the things that I kind of referred to, earlier. Like hopefully you'll draw inspiration from those as well. And then finally, I'm happy to stick around for like another 10 minutes past the hour once we officially close out. So if anybody wants to just hang out for a few minutes, you're welcome to do that. And in terms of the checkout itself, before I turn it over to Sima, you'll see a checkout on page 5 checkout with like 3 prompts, like what's one lesson or insight, like pluses and deltas. So I just invite you to type, one thing there if you can. So pluses, what went well, deltas, what would be even better. Like if we were to do the exact same session, again, like what would you change? And then insight, like something that you're basically taking back to your network or to your context. So feel free to type that in the next couple of minutes. And Seema, back to you.
Thank you, Zarko. And maybe one other thing I want to offer is that if anybody wants to add additional resources that they know of to this page, please do as well. I noticed somebody chatted something, so feel free to add that as well. So I'm just going to close out the conversation with some upcoming Collective Mind opportunities. So tomorrow we actually have a Network Management 101. It's sort of an overview of effective network management practices and skills based off of a capacity assessment tool that we've developed proprietarily, and then a Networks 101 closer towards the end of the month, and then our Collective Mind Academy, which is a 12-week semester-long learning and training program, but you can join at any time based on the 5 modules that we have available. So all of that information is on our website. It's a great, go to the website, it's a great go-to for all of these different resources. But thank you all for joining. And if anybody has any conversations that they want to host as part of this community conversation series, please also reach out to me and let me know. I mean, it's sort of, part of what this whole conversation was about today is learning from each other and creating the spaces for that to happen. That's a lot of what we do. And so if anybody wants to host a conversation to share their knowledge and experience, let me know, because we would love to have you. So thank you all so much. Zarko, thank you so much for hosting this conversation and giving us such a multitude of experience and resources and practical tools and tips that everybody can take back with them. So I'll close things out from there. We're right on the mark. And thank you again. Like as Zarko mentioned, I'll end the recording now, but if anybody wants to stay on to talk with Zarko, we'll be here. Thanks, everybody.
Bye to those who need to go.